The ambulance doors slammed shut as the elderly woman fought for every breath, her trembling hand still gripping the sleeve of the man who had risked everything to save her. Around them, shocked shoppers stood frozen, while security guards whispered among themselves. No one knew that the exhausted single father, covered in dust and tears, had just saved the life of one of the city's most respected businesswomen. Instead of receiving gratitude, he was handed a termination letter before the ambulance even disappeared down the street. He watched his job vanish in the same moment he watched the woman he had rescued disappear toward the hospital. What happened over the following days would change not only his own future, but the lives of everyone who had chosen greed over compassion. Before we begin, if you believe kindness always comes back in unexpected ways and everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Enlighten Story. 2. Your support helps us continue bringing inspiring stories that remind the world that hope is never truly lost. Morning sunlight poured across the busy streets as 29-year-old James Calloway hurried toward the downtown shopping plaza. He balanced a worn backpack on one shoulder and held the tiny hand of his 6-year-old son, Lucas, who smiled despite the patched knees on his school uniform. Life had never been generous to James. His wife had walked away years earlier, leaving behind unpaid bills and broken promises. Since then, every sunrise had become another race against time. He worked as a cashier at an upscale department store during the day and cleaned offices several evenings each week just to keep food on the table and rent paid. Sleep had become a luxury he barely remembered. Yet every morning he forced himself to smile because Lucas deserved to believe tomorrow would always be better than today. The department store prided itself on elegance and perfection. Employees were reminded daily that customers came first. Appearances mattered and delays were unacceptable. James rarely complained. He greeted every shopper with warmth, helped elderly customers carry heavy bags, and often skipped his own lunch break to assist overwhelmed coworkers. Many customers remembered his gentle smile, but management barely noticed him unless something went wrong. That morning, the store buzzed with excitement because an influential investor was rumored to be visiting nearby businesses. Managers rushed employees from aisle to aisle, polishing displays and checking uniforms. James quietly focused on his register, hoping the busy day would pass without problems. Lucas was safely at school, and he planned to surprise him with his favorite vegetable soup for dinner if he could afford fresh ingredients after work. Around noon, panic erupted just outside the store entrance. An elderly woman suddenly collapsed near the fountain, striking her head against the pavement. Shoppers screamed. Several people lifted their phones to record the frightening scene, while others backed away in confusion. The old woman's breathing became shallow and her face turned pale within seconds. Without thinking about company policy or angry supervisors, James abandoned his register and sprinted outside. He remembered the first aid lessons he had attended years earlier at a community center. Kneeling beside the stranger, he checked her pulse, steadied her breathing, and instructed nearby witnesses to call emergency services immediately. He stayed calm despite the growing crowd, speaking gently while supporting her head and keeping her conscious until paramedics arrived. Blood stained his sleeves and dust covered his uniform, but he never stepped away. The elderly woman opened her eyes only briefly before losing consciousness again, her fingers weakly holding on to James's arm as though she somehow knew he was the reason she still had hope. The ambulance finally arrived. Paramedics praised his quick actions, quietly admitting that several more minutes without assistance could have cost the woman her life. James watched them drive away with relief filling his tired heart. He believed he had simply done what any decent person should have done. The moment he walked back into the store, reality struck harder than he ever expected. His manager stood waiting with folded arms and a face full of anger. Customers had been left waiting at the register. Complaints had reached the front office and company policy clearly stated that employees were never allowed to leave their assigned stations without authorization. James tried explaining the emergency, but no one wanted to hear it. Within minutes, he was escorted into a small office where a termination notice was placed on the desk. Years of loyalty disappeared beneath a single signature. He walked out carrying a cardboard box filled with family photos, a coffee mug Lucas had painted for Father's Day, and the crushing weight of uncertainty. Tears blurred his vision, yet he refused to cry until he reached the bus stop. He could not understand how saving someone's life had become the reason he lost the only stable income his little family had. That evening, Lucas noticed the sadness hiding behind his father's smile. Their apartment felt quieter than ever. James counted the few dollars remaining inside an old kitchen jar, realizing they would barely cover groceries for the week. He silently wondered how he would pay next month's rent. Fear wrapped around his heart like heavy chains, but he kissed Lucas goodnight and whispered that everything would somehow work out. He refused to let him see the storm raging inside him. Meanwhile, the elderly woman he had rescued slowly regained consciousness in a private hospital room. Her name was Dorothy Hartwell, the retired founder of one of the country's largest construction companies. Doctors informed her family that immediate assistance at the scene had prevented permanent brain damage. Dorothy listened carefully, asking only one question. She wanted to know who the man was who had refused to leave her side. Her grandson, Benjamin Hartwell, arrived from an overseas business meeting late that night. At only 35, Benjamin had already built a reputation as one of the city's most successful young billionaires after expanding his grandmother's company into international markets. Although newspapers admired his wealth, those closest to him knew his greatest weakness was family. Hearing that his grandmother had nearly died shook him deeply. When Dorothy finally described the exhausted young father who had saved her. Benjamin ordered his assistants to find him immediately. What they discovered left him stunned. Security footage from the shopping plaza clearly showed James rushing toward the fallen woman while dozens of others hesitated. Even more disturbing was learning he had been fired moments later for leaving his register. Benjamin watched the footage several times in silence. Each replay strengthened his disbelief. The man who had saved his grandmother had lost everything because he chose compassion over corporate rules. The following morning, James spent hours walking from business to business searching for work. Every application seemed to end with the same polite rejection. Companies wanted experience, flexible schedules, or immediate availability that conflicted with caring for Lucas. By afternoon, the blistering sun made every step feel heavier. Still, he refused to give up. As he left another unsuccessful interview, a sleek black car quietly pulled beside the sidewalk. He assumed someone important was simply passing through until the passenger door opened and a well-dressed gentleman respectfully introduced himself as Benjamin Hartwell. James immediately worried he had somehow done something wrong. Instead, Benjamin thanked him with genuine emotion. He explained that the woman he had rescued was his grandmother and that their family owed him far more than words could express. James listened politely, but insisted he expected nothing in return. He believed kindness should never come with a price tag. He had simply seen another human being in need. Those humble words affected Benjamin more deeply than any business negotiation ever had. For the first time in years, he met someone whose actions could not be explained by profit, recognition, or personal gain. He had risked his livelihood to save a stranger without knowing her name or fortune. Benjamin invited James to visit the hospital so Dorothy could personally thank him. Reluctantly, he accepted, bringing Lucas along after school. Watching Dorothy embrace the little boy with grateful tears reminded everyone in the room that miracles often arrive through ordinary people. Before leaving, Dorothy quietly asked Benjamin to investigate the department store that had dismissed such an honorable employee. What Benjamin uncovered shocked even experienced executives. The store's management had developed a reputation for mistreating workers, ignoring emergencies, and intimidating staff into silence. Within days, news of James's dismissal spread across local media after witnesses shared videos showing him saving Dorothy's life. Public opinion changed overnight. Thousands of people questioned how any company could punish someone for preventing a tragedy. The department store suddenly faced overwhelming criticism, declining sales, and embarrassed investors. Executives who had ignored James's pleas now desperately tried contacting him, offering apologies and promises to restore his position. But life had already begun moving in a different direction. Benjamin approached James with an opportunity unlike anything he had imagined. Instead of returning to the place that had broken his spirit, he offered him a position leading the Community Outreach Foundation funded by the Hartwell family. The role included fair pay, flexible hours, healthcare, educational assistance for Lucas, and the chance to organize programs helping struggling parents find employment. James could hardly believe someone trusted him with such responsibility. Benjamin simply smiled and explained that compassion could never be taught in business school. Skills could always be learned, but a heart willing to help strangers was priceless. Over the following months, James transformed the foundation into a beacon of hope. Hundreds of single parents received job training, emergency childcare, and financial guidance. Families who once believed they had no future slowly rebuilt their lives because one man understood exactly what hopelessness felt like. Lucas flourished as well. He watched his father regain his confidence, laughing more often than he had seen in years. Their tiny apartment eventually became a warm little home filled not with expensive possessions, but with peace, gratitude, and hope. Even Dorothy recovered fully, often telling visitors that her second chance at life had not come from wealth or influence, but from the courage of a tired single father who refused to walk away when everyone else stood still. The department store eventually changed its emergency policies, proving that sometimes one act of kindness can force an entire organization to rethink its values. Although the apology arrived too late to restore what James had lost, it reminded others that doing the right thing should never be punished. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Enlighten Story. 2. Every act of support helps spread more stories of kindness that inspire people around the world. Special request, comment below. Kindness always finds its way back. We'd love to know where you're watching from and whether you believe one good deed can change a person's life. As the sun set over the city, James realized that losing his job had never been the end of his story. It had simply been the painful beginning of a far greater purpose. Sometimes life closes one door with heartbreaking force only to reveal another that leads to hope, healing, and blessings beyond imagination. His journey became living proof that true kindness never disappears. It quietly travels through the lives it touches until one day it returns with a reward far greater than anyone could have expected. And in a world that often seems driven by power and money, the greatest miracle of all remains a compassionate heart willing to help a stranger without expecting anything in return.